The learning objectives in this video will be to use Python to create an external file to write output. We will use open, write, and close functions or methods to accomplish this task. Rather than the computer displaying output to the screen or the console, the output will be directed to a file. Some data or information are private and need to be stored in a file. After information has been processed by the computer, it may need to be sent to other programs and further processed. So overall, when a program needs to save data for later use, it writes the data in a file. The data can be read from a file later. And in other videos, you will learn how to read data from a file. For the program to retain the data between the time it is run, you must save that data. So data is saved to a file, typically on the computer disk or OneDrive. Saved data can be retrieved and used at a later time. So we write data by saving the data on a file, and the output file, and of course that's just a file that where data is written to. And here's just a brief illustration of how we have variable names and they're going to be written to a disk, OneDrive, or any other storage device that is available. In a previous video, we showed you how to create a function to add the prices and calculate the average of the prices. Now we're going to show you how to create an external file for the output, and then we're going to create a function to write output to the external file. So let's take a look at a previous program that we were working on to calculate the average and add the prices functions. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to resave this file, and we will next add a function to create an output file. Be sure to go back and add comments to describe your function. That should show up above the definition of the function, and just before you exit that function, you indicate where the function starts above, and then just before we end, where the function ends. The reason for that is because you're going to have a lot of different functions in your program, at least the way we are doing it now. Okay, so the next step is we're going to create a function that allows the program to create a brand new file where output is going to be stored. So the first step is we're going to type DEF, and these names that I choose are arbitrary. They're just pretty much describing what the function is going to do. So I'm going to say create out file or output file, and because I am not necessarily grabbing anything from the main program, this is going to be a function that returns a value through its name. So I do not need any parameters. I could put parameters there, but that's not necessary the way I am laying it out. So the next step is I'm going to say, this is an arbitrary name. I'm going to say file name is going to equal to. So what I'm doing is I'm going to ask the user to enter the file name where we want to store the results. So I'm going to say file name input, and it will be inputting a string of characters, so I didn't have to say float input. And I'm really taking input and print and combining them together. Enter the file name where the output will be written, and I want the computer to display this label or these directions, but move down to another line, so that's what the backslash and the n does. The backslash and n is an escape code, which means new line. So it's going to display into the file name where the output will be written, and it will move down one line so that the user will enter that information there. Next, I'm going to say W file. That's going to be the object that we will reference when we wish to write something to a file. That's just an arbitrary variable name I chose, but it's going to act as an object where the results are going to be stored. Yes, this is new, but it's going to make sense the more you play around and navigate through these output files or files to be read, or any files manipulations for that matter. Okay, so I'm going to say open. That's another key function, and you notice it shows a little template here to say open a file, mode for reading, buffering, encoding. There's a whole litany of options, but we're going to say open, and then the file name, that's the one that we're going to enter. See, file name, which is fname, is asking the question. So as soon as the user enters it, we're going to tell the computer to open that file. And the file that we're going to create is a text file. So rather than the user having to write .txt for every file, I'm just going to add it to this by saying .txt, comma, and then we're telling the computer to open this file so that we can write to this file. There's a lot of things going on here, and we want to make sure we understand what's going on here. So what I'm going to do is I'll put a little comment here so that you'll know what's going on. So what we did in the first step was we allowed the user to enter a file name where the results will be stored. So as soon as the user enters that name, the next step is we're going to tell the computer to open that variable or that file name that the user just entered, and make sure that when it is open, it's going to automatically add the .txt, and then it's going to be open for writing. The W is a mode that stands for writing. We're going to take all this and store it in a special variable that acts as an object where the results will be stored. So rather than us having to reference this every time we want to write something, whenever we wish to write, we'll just say write. Now remember, these are just arbitrary variable names I just made up as I went along. Okay, the next step is we're going to say return the file name and W file. And then the last step is we're going to say in the create output file function. Okay, so that's what we are doing. We're just creating a function that will allow us to be able to tell the program to direct the output to a file. The next step is that we're going to tell the computer to now be able to write designated data to the output file. This time we want the computer to write all the prices and the total price information. So far this is all we have here, but this is what's going to happen. Okay, first let me add the new lines that should make this a more dynamic statement for output. So I'm going to say, let's go ahead on and we're going to add print, and I'll say purchase amount, and I want to center that, and that'll just give me a heading for my output. We didn't do that in the previous one, but we'll say some lines to display across in the heading, and now we're going to display each of the items for price 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, so what I've done is I've added a heading. That's what this is here, with some lines between there. And then I'm using the F string to display each of the prices. So we use the F string to display price 1, and I allocated 18 positions. I made everything 18 so that the values or the next objects that are following it will align correctly. And I put a dollar sign in between there. The greater than symbol means that when I write the dollar sign, it's going to write a line and allocate 2 positions for that. And then of course we have price 1 and allocated 13 characters, or positions rather. Included in those 13 characters is a comma, a decimal, 2 places to the right of the decimal, and then the F, which stands for float. And we are centering everything. Likewise for the total price, the average, and then of course you'll see how this is outlined. Alright, so the reason why I'm paying attention to this is because this is right here where it says output operations. These are the only statements that we want to send to the output file. To do that, we have the file name that we're entering, and the computer is going to use this object so that we write the information to a file. So in order for that to happen, for each of these statements, we're going to change them to wfile.write rather than print. Print automatically sends things to the screen, but we want the computer to write it to an output file. And this is what we're going to do. Stay tuned, because the next video will show you how to actually write the results to a file. And then we're going to call these functions. Remember, you can create functions, but until you call them, they will not be executed and there will be no changes in the program.